On today's program, Brenda Sanders gets us ready for next year's flowering bulbs. Ray Campbell is doing some summer maintenance in the ornamental beds. And Barbara Brown has a watermelon and chicken salad in a jar. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Well, summer is coming to an end and fall is starting, and it's hard to believe that it's actually time to start thinking about next year's gardening season. But if you would like to plant bulbs in your garden, now is the time to start doing your research. And one of the best places to start is to either get out all those bulb catalogs that you're receiving in the mail right now, or go online and check out some of the bulb growers. It's really good to do that research first, even if you're going to purchase your bulbs at a garden center, which is fine. You can mail order or purchase bulbs at a garden center. Sometimes it's nice to just look at your bulbs and see what they look like before you put them in the ground, instead of being surprised by what you get in the mail. However, there are some very reputable dealers, and so it's fine. But you want to start with the catalogs, and just to look, we'll use tulips as an example, and check the bloom time, because they come in different groups. That you can have early season, mid-season, and late season. Same goes for daffodils. And you want to check and see when they bloom. Now, if you're buying these in a nursery or garden center, it will usually tell you on the package. And if you want your tulips or your daffodils to bloom at the same time, you're going to want to line that up. So have all early season. If you want to spread out your bloom time, then you'd like to have some in each category. Now, once you've done that type of research, then what you want to do, if you're picking them out on your own, is you want to go in, and when you're purchasing them, this is a muscari, and it is an example of a bulb that has a tunic on it. This papery covering, you want to make sure that your bulbs have this papery covering, and they're not, if they're just white like that, you don't want those bulbs. You want the ones that have their outer covering on it. The other thing that you want to look for are bulbs that aren't shriveled. You want to make sure that they're plump. These are some iris, and if you look here, you can kind of tell that these have dried out, and that means they're old. So it's kind of like when you go to the store and you buy garlic, you know how you kind of look and you kind of squeeze it, and if it's firm, then you know it's good. Same thing goes for bulbs. You want to make sure they're firm and that they don't have any mold on them or insect damage. Now, I actually have some daffodils here that I dug that I'm going to replant. Daffodils are one that crowd out, and so over time you may notice that you have a whole lot of foliage and not as many blooms. And so if that starts happening, what you can do is dig them and divide them. You can actually do that right now, because what happens to bulbs, why they do so well, is they go dormant over the summer. See, they don't even have any roots on them right now. And that way, they don't use any water over the summer. You can dig them, divide them, and then plant them back in the ground, and that's what we're going to do. Now, usually, they tell you to do this when the foliage turns brown, which is a good time to divide them, which is earlier in the season, because you can actually find them. If you know where your bulbs are, you can still dig them and divide them right now. So if you missed that opportunity and you know where they are, go ahead and dig them now. Just dig a little deeper than what you planted them, because over time what happens is they tend to kind of work themselves down deeper in the soil, which is also why they may not bloom as well. Now I have these daffodils, and that brings up another point as to the planting depth. Now there are several different ways that you can plant them, but first, how do you know how deep? Because that's very important. If you plant them too deep, they may not grow or they may not bloom for you. If you plant them too shallowly, they may freeze out or get dug up by animals and eaten. So generally speaking, you want to plant them about 2 times the height of the bulb. Now the interesting thing about that is this is probably about 1.5 inches, so I'd say maybe 3 inches tall. You can vary that a bit, 1 inch on either side, and it can really depend on the soil that you have. If you have a sandy soil, you can plant bulbs deeper. If you have a very heavy clay soil like we have here, then you can bring them up a little bit, but don't get too shallow. So I have these daffodil bulbs, and I am going to plant them. Now the other thing that varies is how you can plant them. You've seen these. They're bulb planters. You can dig individual holes and go in. You can also use an auger, which goes on your drill. They even make them, if you don't like to bend over quite so much, you can have a longer auger. These are both wonderful tools for planting bulbs, and they make quick work of it. The way that I like to plant bulbs, because I kind of tend to want to have a more naturalized look, is to dig a hole or trench here, and I've got it dug, and then place them inside. Now I've got my trench dug, and say I'm going to plant these at about, I'm going to plant these at about 4 inches deep, and that would be 4 inches from the bottom of the bulb. I've got my trench dug, and I've got the soil loosened a couple inches deeper than that. And that's a good thing to do. Go ahead and loosen the soil. If I were going to plant them at 4 inches, loosen them to about 6 inches or even maybe 8 inches and get that soil worked up. Then we're going to add some bone meal. You can also add like tulip or bulb food in, and it'll tell you on the package how much. This is about a teaspoon per plant, and this is the area that you want to work that in. So we're just going to kind of broadcast it in here and mix it around. Now the reason that you do this is that your roots are going to be taking up the nutrients, and so you want that fertilizer worked in down around the roots and not up here around the bulb. Then what you can do is just come in here and plant your bulbs. And that's another thing, it will say on the package about how far apart to plant them. And if you're kind of naturalizing them, you can actually put them a little closer together if you like. And we're just going to place them in here. The other thing that you can do is maybe vary the spacing a bit so that they look a little bit more like they just happened to grow in here instead of being planted. So, all right, now I've got them placed in here. The next thing that you're going to do is just take and cover them with your soil, and go ahead and break that up good. And now I'm going to cover these, and then I'm going to water them in. But after that, I really don't want to water them again until I start to see foliage. It's very important, because bulbs like to be dry when they're dormant, that you don't overwater them while they don't have any foliage and they're not taking up any water. And that's another good reason why when you pick your planting site, to choose a well-drained area, someplace that doesn't hold water, especially over the winter. But you have a better chance of your bulbs not drowning out on you. So anyway, after we get them covered, we're going to water them in. And then just like that, we've got a great start on next season's garden.
Well, many of us have mixed beds of both annuals and perennials in the landscape. And we do that for a variety of reasons. One is, of course, to fill in an area. Another more important reason, perhaps, is to have some season-long color. And that's what we've got here in this bed. This is a bed that gets morning shade, but really hot afternoon sun. So I need to have plants that can stand both of those conditions. And today, as we get later into the summer, and I see some of these annuals particularly beginning to look kind of tired and worn, I know it's time to kind of give them a boost so I can continue to have season-long color until at least frost and keep this bed going and looking very, very good. So today I'm just doing some renovating on this particular bed. I'm taking out all my old larkspurs because they really have faded down. And then I'll be coming in and cleaning up these petunias and maybe even giving some of my perennials that are in here a little haircut as well. Because as we get into this time of the year now, the petunias are really beginning to get leggy. You'll notice that they're not blooming quite as well. And while they really thrive in the heat, they still need a little bit of care, particularly this late in the season. So in these petunias, although it kind of might pain me to do it somewhat, I'm going to give them a good haircut. See, I've already got some that are beginning to die back simply because probably of the hot weather and that they perhaps dried out a little bit. So I'm going to come in and just clip all of these back 3 or 4 inches from the top. Get rid of all those old flowers that are on there now. Maybe leave just a few for color, but for the most part just come in and really clean this up good. And as a result of that, then when I do a little bit of feeding and watering of this petunia plant, it's going to come back and really put on some new growth and some nice new flowers for the remainder of the season, and really will make a nice looking plant here throughout the season. So after I've done that, and I'll go ahead and do that probably to all of my petunias in here a little bit later on, then I want to come in and give them some fertilizer of some type. Now I've got a couple of types of fertilizer that you can use because they do need a boost. This is a slow release fertilizer that you can get. It's a very user-friendly fertilizer, I would say, because you can buy this already ready to go with a little shaker on it and just simply shake that around that plant, give it a good dosing of it, and I'll come back and I'll do my entire bed like this to give it a little boost, a little bit of a feed. Now after that, I want to come in also and do some mulching of my bed. On this particular bed here, in the past we've had a mulch that is a shredded cedar bark. It's really a nice mulch. I really like it because it's an attractive mulch. It makes a long-lasting mulch. It really lasts pretty much all the season. But one thing I don't really like about this mulch in this bed is that it has a tendency to crust over. And so when I have a good layer of mulch on here, water doesn't penetrate very well. And so this is a good mulch to use if you have a drip irrigation system down like I do here, so that the water is underneath the mulch. If you don't, and you're going to be watering from overhead with a sprinkler, then I would recommend a lighter mulch, like a more organic type mulch. But I'm going to come in now and go ahead and mulch this down just a little bit more. Today I am using a different type of mulch though. This is a composted cotton burr mulch. Notice that it's not nearly as woody. It's already decomposed quite a bit. And I'll come in and mulch my plants good with it. That will give them a little bit of a boost of nutrients just from the slow release of anything that's already decomposed in that mulch, but also will allow water to penetrate as I get fall rains or as I do some overhead sprinkling on this. Now there are a lot of different kind of mulches we can use in our flower beds and our shrub beds. You may want to use some sort of more woody mulch like cypress mulch or wood chips. I certainly do not recommend that in a flower bed or a flower border because it just simply does not break down as quickly. And when it does break down, it uses a lot of the nitrogen in the soil from the microorganisms that are utilizing that nitrogen to break down. And so I'd rather save that for my shrub bed or my trees. In fact, I've just got through watering a young newly planted tree very, very well, and I've gone ahead and put cypress mulch down around that. So that's what you probably want to use with in your trees and your shrub beds, and use your lighter mulches that are higher in organic matter in your perennial and your annual bed. Now another fertilizer choice you might look at for your flower beds though is a water-soluble fertilizer. There are a lot of these. I happen to pick this particular one up because it's probably the most readily available at all the big box stores as well as the garden centers. And the reason I like this is that we can give this plant or this bed right here a really quick shot of fertilizer in a almost instant feed. I have a applicator that I can use with this. It simply hooks on to, attaches to my hose. This will automatically monitor the amount of fertilizer and water that it mixes. I simply can just pour that in to my container, screw the top on, and I may have several settings on this that I can use, either a spray or a pattern or a soaker pattern or whatever. It also has a dial where I can feed and water at the same time, or I can water only at the same time, plus an on and off dial. So I really like this particular feeder. And the good thing about it is that you can buy the refills and put in there and use this over and over and over again. So I'm going to move this to where it says feed and water. And actually what happens is the water comes up, mixes down inside the jar here, and automatically mixes this at the right consistency to water this plant, give it some water, a little bit of nutrients through the foliage as well as through the roots, and give it a good quick drink of water to water a little bit of that slow release fertilizer in, plus while at the same time giving it a quick shot of early nutrients. It's sort of like giving it a nutrient fix, so to speak, and then later on coming in and putting that slow release fertilizer into action. So, those are just some options you can use to bring your flower bed, your perennials, your annuals back to life this time of the year and continue some nice flowering of these throughout the remainder of the season. I'm going to go ahead and finish this entire bed out. I'll be cutting back some perennials that I've got in order to not only rejuvenate them and have them to continue to bloom a little bit more, but more importantly to allow them to get some more growth on them to store that food into the roots for next year's growth as well. I really like to use a mixture of both annuals and perennials because the perennials are continuous in blooming throughout the season, giving different colors depending on when their bloom cycle is, and the annuals give some good quick color spots. And if you go ahead and renovate those and take them through a process of rejuvenation, you're going to really have a nice mixed bed here for the remainder of the summer. So I will go ahead and finish this up, and then in addition to that, it will leave me a good spot already pre-prepped, so to speak, if I want some more seasonal color in here later on with pansies or garden mums or something like that. The weather's been hot this summer, but we have been blessed with a lot of good rains. But now is the time to go out and take a good look at your flower beds, your perennials, your annuals, your shrub beds, and see where you can give them a little bit of help along to get them through the remainder of the summer so you can enjoy season-long flowering in your landscape.
Today we're doing watermelon and chicken salad in a jar. Now this is a fun concept. We've done something similarly before. However, it's something great for picnics. Anytime you're going to be traveling with food, going to work, going to school, this is a fun idea. So we're going to start with 1/4 cup of brown rice. Now this is cooked ahead. It could be leftovers. You could use instant rice. The caution with cooking it the day before and using it again the next day is that it tends to dry out and can get kind of hard. So probably prefer to use an instant rice and get it done real quick. So I'm going to put about 1/4 cup in the bottom of a wide mouth jar. Notice it's a wide mouth jar. It's easier to fill, even though I used a funnel because I have a little difficulty getting a smaller target. But it's a lot easier to fill than something like this, which is a narrow mouth jar. Simply the diameter makes it easier not only to put it in there, but also to get it out, which is what most people are going to be concerned about. You could also do something real similar in a thermos if you weren't going to be able to keep it refrigerated. This will keep you for a little while, but remember this is summer and your window of opportunity for foodborne illness is much smaller than it might be in other times of year. So 80 degrees or 90 degrees or less, you've got 2 hours, and once it comes above 90, you've got 1 hour if it's not refrigerated to use it. So we've got our carbohydrate down on the bottom. If you want to switch off and use a different one, feel free. On top of that, the next thing I want to do is mix the dressing that's going to go with it. So I've got 1/3 cup of mayonnaise. And Greek yogurt would probably work here too, but I've got good old-fashioned mayonnaise. In fact, this is the Kewpie mayonnaise because I had it left, or a Japanese mayonnaise because I had it left from another project. I'm going to add to that 1/4 cup of chutney. Now this is a condiment that's often used in Asian cultures. It can have any kind of fruit. It's got vinegar and lots of different spices. You can make your own or you can buy it in the supermarket. But because it has often chunks of fruit, this one's got mango, you're never going to get this sauce smoothed or the dressing smoothed completely. You're going to find little chunks. And in fact, in the one we finished, you'll see little chunks there, and that's what that is. 2 teaspoons of curry powder. So we're going to follow the Asian theme here in addition to the mayonnaise and the chutney. This is a fair amount of curry, but we're going to divide it over a lot of salad, so it's going to be fine. By the time we get down to it, there's going to be a 1/2 teaspoon in each one. Also to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of diced red onion and a 1/3 cup of sliced or diced celery, whichever you want to do, and about 1/4 cup of craisins or raisins or dried blueberries or dried cherries, whichever one you have. And the last thing is 1.5 cups of cooked chicken breast. Now, if you have leftover cooked chicken, that works for this. If you don't have leftover cooked chicken, then you can get a couple of boneless, skinless chicken breasts, cover them with water in a saucepan, put them on the stove over medium heat, bring them up to a boil, reduce the heat, and just let them simmer for about 15 minutes. And that's the way I actually prefer to do it for this kind of thing because the meat stays amazingly moist, whereas with a roast chicken, for instance, or a grilled chicken, which would work, the meat tends to dry out a little bit. So that's the basic gist of the salad. So we've got our carbohydrate in here. Wipe my finger off a little bit. To this, we're going to add about 1/2 cup of watermelon. So you'll need to have 2 cups for the whole thing. Again, just get those in on top. Shake them around a little bit so they even out. On top of that, we're going to add 1/2 cup of sliced jicama. Now the jicama is nice because it's going to stay crunchy. No matter what we do with it, it will continue to stay crunchy, so we get some texture. The watermelon is going to give us some sweetness. So we get those 2 things in there. And on top of that, we're going to add our chicken combo here. And get that in there. And you're just going to divide these things amongst the 4 jars that you're working with. And then finally, we're going to top it off with some greens. Now I'm using romaine. You want to use something that's fairly sturdy because if you use a really tender one like a leaf lettuce, it's going to wilt over time because it's going to sit here. Now the dressing is underneath. So normally the dressing with contact with the greens, it's got acid in it, it's going to cause it to become wilted. But that's not going to happen here because we have it up above. And you've seen that with other kinds of salads that are layered, whether they're in a jar or not. So as much as you can get in here is the goal. Hopefully at least 1/2 cup. And then finally on top, we're going to put in about a tablespoon of roasted cashews. And that's all there is to it. If you are going to serve it now, it's ready to go. If you're going to eat it later, then put the 2-piece lid on that came with it and put it in the refrigerator, because it does have the chicken in it and other things that will spoil. But I think you're going to like this one. It's fun for one thing, but it's also really, really good. I hope you'll give it a try. It's watermelon and chicken salad in a jar. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
While marking events on your calendar, be sure to consider these wonderful gardening activities coming up in Oklahoma. Next week, we begin visiting our Viewers Garden Contest winners with a trip to a beautiful oasis near Colony, Oklahoma. Turfgrass specialist Justin Moss visits with Professor Lou Anella about underground turfgrass irrigation systems. We look at a beautiful vining plant in the landscape, and Barbara Brown prepares a quinoa vegetable salad. Join us then for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.